Hey everyone, I'm rather Incoherent, and today we're talking about Roland Banks. I hate to include him in the list of the worst characters in the game, but I absolutely think he's one of them, and it breaks my heart a little bit because I love Roland. I think everybody likes Roland to some degree. He's just like the original fighter. He's how you get introduced to the Guardian class, which is, at least initially, it was a staple of the game to have a Guardian fighter. And he feels like Arkham Horror should feel. Vulnerable to the Mythos, able to do a little bit of everything, but good at fighting. And then you start optimizing, you're like, oh, he's actually really vulnerable to the Mythos and not that good at fighting, and this book is not helpful. Like, as you start learning the game, he stops being like iconic of how the game might maybe should work, and starts being iconic of a lot of different things that make a character weak. But a 4-fist Guardian can easily kill everything in the game. The card pool easily lets you do that, so can you overcome the 3-head and the 2-foot? Is there a real way to use the book? I've worked on enough Joe Diamond decks to immediately tell you the answer cannot be yes to all of them. If you're killing stuff with fist and fixing these problems, you're not using your book. And since you gotta stay alive and you gotta do something, you're not gonna be using your book. There's no way for me to optimize a Roland deck, be like, this is the best Roland I can make, and ever actually be testing this book skill. So we're left with a pretty subpar stat line, and the 9-5 soak split leaves us pretty scared. 3-head is workable, with 5 horror, it's scary, but where it becomes a problem, and this happens rarely in this series, but it will happen now, is with your signature weakness. Typically, when a character is bad, it doesn't really matter what their signatures are and what their signature weakness is, because the signature assets are very rarely something important to a character where it's going to meaningfully impact their power level and like move them more than 1 or 2 spots on the tier list, and signature weakness are rarely so harsh that it really impacts the character. But when you have 5 horror soak and a signature weakness that can just randomly pop up at the end of a scenario and you don't have time to clear it and it deals you a mental trauma, that is incredibly scary. Roland is one of the characters that is the easiest to lose a game as and actually die with. Additionally, the way cover up works is you clear it essentially by getting 3 extra clues, and the problem with that is that the selling pitch for Roland we hadn't got to yet is after you defeat an enemy, discover a clue at your location, lit once per round. So the idea is he's the Guardian that gets clues. You kill guys to get clues, it's wonderful, and I am a big proponent of that idea. I think a character like Cho, who I think is much better than Roland, by the way, who is just able to kill literally everything but is not immune to the Mythos and doesn't make his team faster or better or safer and doesn't get clues, I think Cho's just pretty damn good. I think he's nowhere near the top tier of characters, because I think doing stuff like getting clues is how you really push a fighter over the edge. So Roland's sales pitch of I'm the fighter that gets clues, he is singing the song of my people. He is tempting me to make the won't Roland work so badly. That's why stuff like the deck tech for the Bandolier double Runic Axe build came out before I noticed the random balance signature sign on Runic Axe preventing double Runic Axe. I want to make Roland work really badly because this is an ability that is fundamentally super powerful. And with his card building rules of Guardian 0 to 5, Seeker 0 to 2, like, yeah, he's gonna have a hard time using the stuff in Seeker that gets clues, but the stuff that draws cards, that's wonderful. I hate running Backpack, I hate running Prepared for the Worst. Give me Deep Knowledge instead every day of the week. There are a bunch of cards in Seeker that are just generically good economy. I would love to have Crack the Case on a fighter with Safeguard. That's so much better than anything else I have access to, because I can trust that my Clover is going to trigger that pretty immediately. There are a ton of just generically good cards like Shortcut as well in Seeker that are still valuable in a fighter. So his card pool, despite the fact that Seeker really doesn't help him fight with Fist, and I don't think I want to try to use this book, absolutely is great for a fighter. What it really comes down to is making these Mythos stats acceptable and surviving your 5 horror. And I might be moving Roland up the tier list a lot in the near future because of one card that's been revealed for Drowned City. If you don't want to see that, I'm sorry to say that you can leave now. But I don't think I think there's a very small number of people that care about seeing one card. But that's your spoiler warning. I've gone on long enough. Let's go over to a deck. This is a pretty basic Runic Axe fighter Roland deck that I've cooked up. It uses Runic Axe because it's the best weapon in the game that requires the least experience to be a fully functional late game weapon. Machete's a backup weapon, so is his signature. Hallowed Mirror to help fix my horror if I'm taking a lot in the scenario. Mr. Rook for Search and Soak, Beat Cop because he's the best fighting ally. Safeguard level 2, just one of it because I'm a greedy jackass. Crack the Case, Deep Knowledge, 1 Emergency Hash, 1 Ever Vigilant, and 1 Shortcut, all under a stick to the plan. 2-second wins, but not really, because these are the new card. They are my proxy for Ready for Anything. It is essentially the horror version of Ready for Anything, except instead of being triggered by drawing a Treachery to get an additional heal, it gets an additional draw if you drew an enemy, and it doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity. I'm currently proxying this in a Dark Matter campaign as Lily Chen, and it's a really good card. It's exactly as generally useful as I thought it would be, and it's better in characters like Roland who are terrified of horror damage. And then continuing the deck list, 2 copies of Stand Together 3 because it's an incredible card, and then just a pile of skills, in particular Guts, because you have to be able to break through, Frozen in Fear. Take the Initiative is also great. I'm only running the 1 Vicious Blow because it's basically the same card as Strong Armed, but a little bit worse. You can see the sales pitch for the deck. It's going to have like the best economy and the best team support economy because of Crack the Case. It's going to have really good consistency finding Runic Axe compared to other Guardians. It's got enough room left over to run very easily some top tier skills. The issue, in its entirety, is that Guts and Take the Initiative isn't quite enough to reliably pass a test with base 3 head. So it doesn't feel like it's good enough yet. Like, I'm not convinced I get to run this Mr. Rook. Maybe it's got to be like a Brother Xavier for the bonus head. That's a lot of money though. The Mythos Resilience isn't really all there yet. It's close. I think it's close. I think you get to move Roland up at least a few spots because we're Ready for Anything being a meaningful improvement on how likely he is to die from horror. But I still don't think he's all there. I think this 5 soak is just brutal considering his weakness. I just have to reiterate how brutal Cover Up is, because costing you 3 clues when your whole sales pitch is that you're the guy who gets clues means that essentially Roland has to trigger his ability 4 times for it to even be an ability. Anything less than 4 triggers and Roland is at a clue deficit. So Roland really has to be triggering this ability, but that's not entirely up to you. It depends on the clues on your location, how the enemies spawn. If you have a game where you just like keep drawing no enemies, then 3 enemies all at once, and like you only get this once per round, you might struggle to ever get out of the hole in the first place. And absolutely, there'll be games that are the complete opposite. Every round, you hit a rat, you hit a rat, you hit a small ghoul, you hit a rat, you hit a big ghoul. Just 5 rounds in a row, you easily get a clue, and you're incredible. But a substantial chunk of the sales pitch for Roland is negated by that weakness, and I don't live in Disneyland. I know that in a lot of games, I'm only gonna get like 6 or 7 clues with that ability, and that's still a meaningful improvement for my team, but that's just like 1 pilfer off of a green fighter that uses it, right? Like there are other ways that other characters can get clues that are roughly on par with this ability. This ability doesn't do nearly as much as it needs to. It feels like Cover Up was a weakness tailor-made to kill this character, to make his 5 horror soak into a tremendous problem, to put a hard limit on just how clue positive he could be. And it's really frustrating because after you overcome all your weaknesses, you still have to get good RNG with enemy density to actually make a ton of use out of his ability. And I think like realistically, I'm gonna keep hammering out Roland decks. I've got him as the lowest ranked Guardian fighter right now because he's ranked there as though Ready for Anything didn't exist. And I'm sure he's gonna move up in D tier. I'm probably gonna be able to move him all the way up to like where Hank Samson is by the end of the next expansion, right? I'm gonna be able to just keep making changes to the deck, find a deck with better soak, with better solutions to the Mythos, and find a deck that is able to like not be scared of dying, and then on top of that also be able to reliably break a Frozen in Fear. And once you make all of that happen, you have a Roland whose weaknesses are much more mitigated, and he's still not going to ever be incredible because he's not going to get that many clues, but he's better than like the fact that he's worse than Tommy, way worse than Hank right now. It's all because he's afraid of dying to his 5 horror soak and his weakness that makes it even worse. I don't know why the parallel Roland image on the side here is all janky and sideways. Don't worry about it, you can see what it actually does on the left. I need to mention parallel Roland because I view it as a deck building option for the original Roland, and I need to like establish, though I think it makes him better, makes him worse. I think the directives on a whole are a net loss in power, because if you're just -3 clues to your team as the fighter, when getting clues is one of the main ways you can establish that you're a better fighter, that's really detrimental. Like you're starting off in a hole there. And that means the directives have to be like really strong, but every directive is a positive and a negative. I'm not going to show them all right now. But you can only really build a deck where you have like 2 inherently good directives and they're still not tremendously good. The star is something that's completely blank. You can never plan around this. So really the reason to care about Parallel Roland if the directives aren't great is because you're going to look at new deck building options. Insight 0-3, Tactics 0-3. Just a heads up, if you play Parallel Roland, just take the front. You might be able to like convince yourself that you found a cook where directives are good. You have 2 guns, you have 2 directives that are really good in your specific list. You flip the 3rd one over at permanently just like every time as soon as it's a problem. And that's possible. That could maybe compete with or even outclass original Rolands. However, this deck pool is terrible. It seems like the idea is you're supposed to play a more flex-oriented Roland because you're losing access to the big Guardian weapons. But if you want to play Flex Roland, losing access to the Seeker cards is a really big problem. Insight 0-3 is basically bad Seeker access. Tactics 0-3 and Insight 0-3 together is a relatively narrow card pool. Parallel Roland's back is god-awful. His front is interesting and worth a look, but I don't think it has any, like, it might be a little bit better than Roland presently. It doesn't have the same ceiling for potential as Roland does. And across all the times I've looked at Parallel Roland, which is a distressingly high number of times, I've never found a build that convinced me he was fixing Roland in any capacity. I think Roland is, unfortunately, the worst Guardian fighter. He's real close to edging out Tommy and being right next to Leo, but on the whole, the gaps between Roland, Tommy, and Leo are not that big. The middle to bottom of D tier is not that far behind the bottom of C tier. And you know what I just realized as I said all of that? It means that I've built my tiers wrong. Welcome to D tier, Leo. That fucking sucks. Actually, no, I'm not gonna explain anything about Leo that I just moved down. We'll talk about him when we get to him because he's officially part of this series now. Because unlike Sister Mary, I don't believe Leo deserves to be in a different tier than Roland and Tommy. He's got different weaknesses, different strengths, and I think he's meaningfully better, but not worth being in a separate tier. Anyway, I feel like I fully explained the problem with Roland because it's pretty simple. He can't take very much damage. Well, horror, but I use the term damage as like all types. He can't take very much horror. He can't take very much horror trauma. His weakness gives him horror trauma, and the way you deal with his weakness defeats the reason to play him. He starts off in a hole that he has to dig himself out of, and how well he digs out of it is up to the scenario entirely and not to you. Roland is a character that I really want to make work. It feels like a deck building puzzle that should be solvable, but it turns out that simultaneously fixing your limited soak and your head stat is a lot more work than it sounds like it would be, and between that and getting your fist online, he just ends up being fine. And I know C tier is fine, but I'm speaking in campaign terms. Roland will be a successful fighter over the course of a campaign. Every 4-Fist Guardian will. I don't even feel like I need to elaborate. 4-Fist Guardians with big weapons kill shit. That's the job you gave the guy. He's going to succeed. But there's next to no reason to pick Roland over other characters because he's so damn frail, and I'm really hoping that with proper deck building and new cards, we can get over that hump and move him up to the top with Leo and just leave Tommy down at the bottom alone because I hate Tommy and I'd really like Roland to not be next to Tommy. That's probably for tomorrow's video though. For now, I'm done. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about why Roland's not that strong of an investigator, what his unique problems are, and why I think maybe he can move up with some more cooking. Or some more ingredients. Let's see what the Drowned City has to offer, right? Anyways, for now, I'm done. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, and before I go, a massive thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon.